Let's talk about lunge modifications. The lunge is a super common drill seen in the gym and training programs for good reason, but it's also often associated with a lot of pain in the knees or the hips or the ankles or the toes. And so a lot of people just avoid them altogether. But the lunge is really great for building strength. And so we want to find ways that you can still use the lunge in your programming and strength training that doesn't bring you pain. Now, we're not really addressing why you might feel pain. We're just going to be adding tools so that you can perform the lunge with or without load, and so that you don't feel some of that pain that you may be experiencing. Hopefully, after building some strength in that lunge or digging deeper and finding out why you may be feeling pain in your lunge, then you'll be able to progress to a full lunge or even some dynamic versions or other variations of lunges. But let's just try some quick examples to help you lunge while still figuring all that other stuff out on the side. So our first variation is going to be done with a chair or a stool or a bench. Now you want the bench to be higher than knee height or just about in line with your knee, because when you go down into that lunge, we don't want the bottom knee to hit the floor. So basically we just want the surface that you're lunging to be elevated a little higher than knee height or even higher than that, like a chair. So we're going to set up our lunge stance, and this may take you a little while to figure out what is optimal. But when we're doing a static lunge, I like to keep that back heel lifted at all times, just so that there's not a whole lot of shifting back and forth with that weight. Now, as we're going into the traditional static lunge, we really want to load up this back leg. So a compensation that I usually see in lunges is leaning the chest forward. So this is a prime example of avoiding loading this back leg and knee, probably because of knee pain or lack of strength in that back hip. So leaning forward in the torso this way. We also see a lot of hips pushing forward this way in our lunge, and the same reason applies. That back leg does not want to take that load, whether it's the knee, the ankle, or the hip. And so we want to train that back leg to really absorb your body weight and be able to produce force in that position. So we are going to, with your left leg closer to the surface, it's going to be in front, and then your right leg is going to be back. We don't want a super wide stance because that's going to promote a lot of loading of that front leg. We want something a little bit closer together with those feet, and I'm going to put my support in my right hand. So whichever hand is the leg that's in back, that's where we're going to need a little bit more support. Now, the surface that you're lunging to is going to be underneath that front hip. So when you're going into this lunge, you're simply going to be sitting down onto your surface with that left hip. So the right hip is free and my right knee is open. Now we want to adjust so that that right knee is right underneath that right hip. So adjust as needed once you get down there. And then you're going to drive into your surface and push down with those feet to come back up. So this is a really simple way of modifying the lunge so that we feel supported in that front hip, and that back knee, we can really focus on loading up. So that back leg is still working, but I'm getting most of the support in that front hip. In addition to that, we're not going as deep as we would with a regular lunge with that knee trying to reach 1 inch away from the floor. So think of it almost as like a box squat. You're really just squatting your hips or lunging your hip down to your surface and then pressing back up. A simple way to progress this movement is just to remove your support. And I'll show you from this angle so you can really see the front leg and my torso. So in this front hip, we're sitting to that support and then we're coming back up. Now, I also want you to pay attention to that back foot and heel. I'll talk about this in every single variation. So the back foot and heel, we want to stay in line with that back knee. So it's very common for this back heel to scooch in and the toes to point out. And we're going to correct that by spinning the heel out and making sure that the toes are tracking over that back knee. So as we do this lunge, we want to watch that this is not happening. And since we have that extra support, we're able to push that heel out, squeeze that knee in, and make our body work in this lunge position. All right, so it's really important that we train our bodies to work in this very strict position before we variate the lunge. Of course, this is not the only way to lunge or the only right way to lunge, but by loading that back, ankle, knee, and hip, we're really doing the most challenging version of that lunge and making sure that those joints are prepared to take load in that position. So if we feel good there, if we feel very supported in that position with the bench or the chair, and we feel like we could do it on our own, we could get up off of that front leg all on our own, then we progress to another variation. This modification is with a yoga block underneath the back knee. So I'm going to set up the exact same way, again, starting with the support, making sure that my stance is not too big. That back heel is going to stay lifted. Now, here's where I also really start to coach both knees straight at the top. So if both knees are straight at the top, then we're really going to feel that hip extension, and we really need that at the bottom of our lunge as well. So we're just going to start coaching straight knees at the top of this lunge position. So the back heel is lifted. I have my support in the right hand, which is the same as the back leg. And then you're just simply going to lunge your right knee down to the block. So this basically blocks your lunge from getting too deep. Of course, you could do this with 2 yoga blocks or something even higher. So we're just changing the support from underneath that front hip to underneath that back knee. Again, as we go into this lunge, we're gonna watch the back foot and heel, making sure that the heel doesn't collapse in and that all 5 toes are pushing into the floor to come back up. Again, we're focusing on knee, hip, shoulders all stacked at the bottom of that lunge to come on up, right? So we're able to do our lunge without feeling that knee pain because we are not going as low in this position. But it's a progression from the last variation because now we don't have support underneath that front hip. So I'll just show you from this angle without the support what that looks like from the side. So again, my lunge stance is not too big. I'm focusing on dropping that knee straight down to the block for my lunge, making sure that heel's not collapsing, and then coming up from here. This is really easy to do with dumbbells if you're performing any type of loaded lunge, but really just want to double check that that back hip is nice and supported and that you're not going to go too low where you're going to start feeling some knee pain. Now we can also progress this version by doing a bottoms up lunge. So instead of going from the top down, we can go from the bottom up. So in this case, you would start in your half kneeling position with your back knee on the yoga block. You would drive down into the floor and then just try to lift that back knee into your lunge position. These are more for isometric holds where you're holding this lunge position for an extended period of time and bringing that knee back down. So this is going to be a lot more end range work for that knee loading, a lot more isolated in that bottom knee. And then we can get into our last variation, which is if you feel toe pain in your lunges. This is a big pain that I see in lunges, that the back toes are really limiting us in that lunge position. Now, there are ways to really address that toe movement individually, but in the meantime, we still want to be able to do our lunges. So we are simply going to take this same bottoms up approach and place the back foot on your yoga block. So now I don't have to worry about that back toe getting into that max range toe extension and then taking load, your body weight, or even external load from there. So now that is totally relaxed. Yes, the ankle is plantar flexed, but we're not going to feel that gigantic stretch in that back toe. So I can do the same thing here, my bottoms up. And in this lunge, in this variation, the easiest way is to go from the bottom up. You could also bring a yoga block underneath that front knee as well, if we also feel knee pain here. So we can modify this position for both the knee and the toe or foot and ankle, lifting the knee up here, hold, 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 and bringing that back knee down. If you wanted to go from the top down with this variation, I would keep the yoga block for underneath the knee and I would use a foam roller for the foot. So you're gonna start the foam roller close to the yoga block. And this one, because we're gonna be rolling on the foam roller, we definitely want to keep that support to help your stability as you go down and up, because that back foot is gonna be moving. So front foot is gonna be in front of the block. My back knee is gonna be over that yoga block, and I want my foot on top of the foam roller. Support is still in the right hand. And then I'm just gonna simply roll back to my lunge, bringing that knee to the block, and then push down with the top of my shin to roll back up. So this is more of a dynamic version, but we're still able to get that top-down lunge movement with these modifications for the knee and the toe. Rolling down to that lunge and coming back up. The focus for this one is still knee underneath the hip, underneath the shoulders, and back up. All right, so those are my 3 simplest ways of modifying the lunge position without needing to change the exercise completely. If you have any questions about these, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.